What's up, Hokie Nation, and welcome into this edition of TSL Today. We record on Monday, April 3rd, 2023, from the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center in Blacksburg, Virginia. Man, do we have a great show planned for you today. David Cunningham, our managing editor, is going to hop on in just a second and talk both Tech men's and women's hoops, and then Chris Hirons joins in the second segment to talk Tech baseball. All that and much more coming up on this edition of TSL Today, and it starts right now. We welcome you back to this edition of TSL Today. This edition of TSL Today, as always, sponsored by Triumph NIL. Triumph NIL, recruit, retain, reward. We appreciate Triumph NIL's support of both TSL and TSL Today. David Cunningham, our managing editor, joins us across the way. Giovanni Heater is behind the scenes. David, first off, how are you? Welcome back to Blacksburg. How was your trip out to Seattle and Dallas?
It was good. God, long. I got back yesterday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Long travels. I was gone for 10 days, which, I mean, of course, is, I think the women's basketball team was probably gone for about the same amount of time. It was good. Seattle was great. I think the second leg was the one that really kicked me, the Dallas leg, because Seattle was fine. It was the coming back. I flew in and out of Dulles. My grandma lives about 10 minutes away from there, out of D.C., and I didn't fly direct to Dallas because it was too complicated to cancel and then get a new flight, and I have to buy an extra flight. So I went back to Dulles, stayed the night at my grandma's house on Tuesday night, and then went to Dallas on Wednesday, and was in Dallas from Wednesday to Sunday. But it was good, man. I mean, lots of really good basketball. I mean, I got to see him win in the Sweet 16, win in the Elite Eight.
Go to the Final Four?
Covered Virginia Tech in the Final Four, and just such an amazing team, such an amazing season. The accomplishments, just that they didn't just win. They didn't just, I think like people look back and go, man, they made the Final Four, but like, they played well in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight to get there. Like, and and they also played well in the Blacksburg Regional, which feels like it was 2 months ago. Yeah, at this point. But this was a really fun team to cover, and the travels were fun. Sunday was more of Saturday was more of a relaxing day after Tech lost on Friday. Andy Bitter was down there with me, and he and I went to the Texas Rangers game on Saturday, so that was nice. And we met up with a couple other Tech people, and went and got some good barbecue, and went to a couple breweries. So, I mean, it was a good trip overall. It was, honestly, I'm just so honored that I was able to cover them. They played so well for so long. I mean, 31-5, like that's historic. And to get to a Final Four, to be 10 minutes away from a national championship game, really, really cool. And they're all such great people to be around. Doesn't feel like you're ever trying to pull teeth when you're talking to them. So it was a really good time, and I'm glad I could go. And Seattle was a blast. And then Dallas was a little bit disappointing, but still really, really cool just to be at the Final Four.
Congrats on your first ever ACC Network appearance too, by the way.
Thanks. Oh yeah, that was cool too. That was God, I did that in American Airlines Center in Dallas, in the media workroom, and it was good. That was one of the other things. Like, it was just so crazy. There was so much going on. I did that, and then an hour or two later, covered a Final Four game, and Tech loses, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, the season's over. So, a lot going on. That was pretty neat. I appreciate them having me on there. That was with Mark Packer and Taylor Tannenbaum, and I thought it was pretty good. So
I turned on ACCPM before the game, and there's David Cunningham. I was with Gio and a couple more, Jack Brizanai, Nick Brown. We were all, oh my gosh, there's David Cunningham. So that was cool.
It was cool. So and then the whole experience of being at a Final Four is cool. Some of the other people some of the other media that was there, they sat up higher. But
You were courtside though, right?
I got to sit right behind the team bench. That was really cool. I tell you what, the fan support too. Like the fans came out in droves for this team, as they should. It was great to see the fan support, not just in Seattle but also in Dallas, and and I wasn't here on Saturday night when they got back, but it looked like a phenomenal crowd that welcomed them back. So, I mean, look, this team is one of the best ever in Virginia Tech athletics history, and the fans should support them as such, and I think they did.
Gio and I actually went to the welcome back on Saturday.
Yeah, how was that?
A lot of people there. And it speaks volumes, too, because they had to stand outside. We were lucky we were at baseball and walked over. But so many people had to stand outside for hours upon hours.
Yeah, because they were supposed because of the wind and weather and everything. Yeah, they were supposed to go to Roanoke, had to go to Raleigh to refuel. Tried Roanoke like 2 or 3 more times until they finally got it. So
But it was cool. Really good turnout, and they definitely deserve it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to go too much into women's basketball. I just want to tease it a little bit because the podcast is going to cover it all much more tomorrow. But how will you remember this Tech women's basketball team in 2022-23?
I think just how, and this is what Kenny Brooks would probably say too, but just how great people they are, right? They're awesome people. They're fun people to cover. The parents are fun. Everybody that like everybody that supports the team, right? And you can probably watch when you're watching on TV, you probably see it a little bit. The parents, right? Liz Kitley's parents, Cayla King's parents, George Amore's parents, who of course flew from Australia for the Final Four. They're all great people. Everybody on staff is a great person. It's awesome people to be around. And as somebody who's been around them since October, which is kind of crazy to think about. I've been around that team since October, since ACC Media Days. And the beginning of April is when their season comes to an end, or the last day of March. That's a long ride. And the fact that nobody ever really gets tired of anybody, everybody's, it's such a tight-knit group, and they're so constant, so consistent. I think it's pretty awesome. Obviously, they did some really historic things, won some really big basketball games. It'll be interesting to see how in the next couple of years how my perspective changes, because maybe there's a team that goes to the Final Four again. But this will always be the first team that did it. This will be the team that won the first ever ACC championship and continued to defy expectations. And they were a 1 seed, and people didn't think they could get out of their own regional, and they won it. And they beat Tennessee and Ohio State along the way, and they played well for the most part in a Final Four game. And they won the ACC. Elizabeth Kitley, 2-time player of the ACC Player of the Year. They continue to make history. And but I think the more important thing is they're all great people to be around. They're all great people to cover. They have great stories, and I never really get tired of covering them. There's always something new to talk about. There's always a really fun story. They're good people, and they accomplished something historic, and I think it's probably one of the greatest seasons in Virginia Tech athletics history.
Is it fair to say everybody knew they were going to be good, but is it fair to say they even exceeded your expectations?
Oh yeah,
this season?
I think a lot of people looked at it, and I will say this. Ashley Owusu came in, was an All-American, and we don't, obviously there's drama. You can go find that drama on social media. But Ashley Owusu got hurt on December 1st.
Yeah, Nebraska.
And then never really played again. And Virginia Tech went to a Final Four without a former All-American. Like to do it with this short of a bench, with the personnel, I'm not surprised. But if you had told me about it at the beginning of the year, I probably would have been like, yeah, I'm like, they only have 2 full-time assistant coaches. They did it with 2 full-time assistant coaches and a 6-7 man rotation. They made it to the Final Four.
I know.
That speaks volumes. And I think, yes, in a lot of ways, they did defy my expectations. Mark Packer asked me on the AC Network the other day, was there a point where you knew this Virginia Tech team was going to do something historic or had the potential to? And I said, yeah, when they won on the road at NC State You were there with me, right?
Yeah.
They had never won in that arena before, in Reynolds Coliseum. Never won. They come in and absolutely throttle NC State, and then they've got Florida State in that stretch. Florida State, Duke, North Carolina. They've throttled them all. They beat Miami and Duke and Louisville in the ACC championship. It was dominant, and I was always surprised by how dominant it was. But looking back on it, that's just who they were. And, you know, I think from the beginning of the year, I'm surprised that they went out and did it, because I don't think a lot of people ever thought it would be done. Like, I think a lot of people were just like, yeah, they're going to be good. Yeah, they'll win a game in the NCAA tournament. They might get to the ACC tournament. They might get to the ACC tournament final. They might be like a 2-3 seed. They might win a game or two. They might getting to the Sweet 16 was the goal.
Mm-hmm.
They got to the Final Four. Like, they won in the Sweet 16 and won in the Elite Eight. And like they were the third ever team in school history across any sport to reach a national semifinal. NCAA tournament semifinal. The other two were men's and women's soccer back in 2007 and 2013. Yeah, men's and women's. Like they broke down all these records, created new ones, and now Elizabeth Kitley. I mean, all-time scoring leader, all-time doubles leader. I mean, they completely defied expectations all over the place.
Well, Liz Kitley made it official yesterday. Hot off the press, Cayla King made it official today. They're coming back for a 5th year and using their COVID year of eligibility. How much does a move like this put Virginia Tech and keep Virginia Tech in the conversation to repeat as ACC champions and potentially get back to the Final Four next season?
Well, I'll put it this way. If it was just Georgia Amore that was returning, I mean, Georgia's a great piece to build around, but you're replacing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Tech would have had essentially 7 scholarships to replace, to fill out to pick out people from the transfer portal to fill a rotation around Georgia. Obviously, they're going to develop some kids, but I think Virginia Tech's trip to the Final Four was one thing. It put the Hokies on the map, as Cayla King told me after the game. We're on the map. Kenny Brooks said we're a destination now. When you bring back Elizabeth Kitley and Cayla King, that's 2 All-Americans on your roster. Cayla King's an All-ACC caliber talent, so you got 3 All-Conference players, 2 All-Americans. Virginia Tech is going to be at the top of everybody's ACC picks next year and in the national conversation. I'm not sure Tech's going to be a top 10 team to start off the year, but it'll depend on how they fill in, how the Hokies fill in everybody around them. But you've got 3 players from a Final Four team coming back. And it's hard to fathom. But Tech is in a great position. And again, I don't think if it was just Georgia returning, I don't know if it would be that. It'd obviously be a little bit more difficult. But I think Tech would be able to do it. But I wouldn't expect Tech to go win the ACC or to have national aspirations, maybe to reach the Sweet 16. Now, I don't know what the goals are after reaching the Final Four. Like, how do you follow that up?
Right.
But the fact that Elizabeth Kitley and Cayla King are back with Georgia Amore, it's a very young Tech team outside of that, right? Hokies had 3 freshmen this year. They've got 4 top 100 kids coming in next year. 4 top 100 kids, right? I don't know how many of them will actually contribute right away, but that's 7 of your 15 scholarships are freshmen or redshirt freshmen or sophomores. Then you've got Cayla King, Georgia Amore, and Elizabeth Kitley, who are either seniors or 5th-year players. Tech's got 5 scholarships now to round out the bunch. That's really, really good. I think the Hokies are in great position to, and people will be like, well, now it's Kenny Brooks' time. You got to figure out the transfer portal. The problem in Kenny Brooks' first 6 years was not that he couldn't recruit. The problem was that the Hokies just struggled to put everything together sometimes on the floor. He got Elizabeth Kitley and Cayla King and Georgia Amore to come to Blacksburg, right? He got Taylor Soule and Kayana Traylor to come to Blacksburg in the transfer portal. He picked up Deasia Gregg, Taylor Emery. I mean, the list goes on and on. Asia Shepard. Kenny's always been, and the staff's always been good recruiting-wise. So the recruiting has never been the issue. The problem was, how far can you get? And the Hokies are in the final, they made the Final Four now. When Virginia Tech's going to go out in the portal, and Virginia Tech's going to say, hey, who wants to come play with us and try to go to a Final Four again?
Right.
And people aren't going to look at it and go, well, I don't know if you guys can make it there. They're going to look at it and go, wow, you guys have been there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you guys are like kind of legit now, right? Like there is some legitimacy to Virginia Tech women's basketball now in terms of the national landscape and on the, Virginia Tech reached the Final Four, right? If I'm a transfer, I'm sitting there going, dang, I could play with Elizabeth Kitley and Georgia Amore and Cayla King and potentially go win an ACC championship and go to the Final Four again. Like everybody, that's the thing, man. Virginia Tech had over 3 million people watch them in the Elite Eight, right? Like eyeballs have been on the Hokies. That is great in terms of your national perspective of you, but also in terms of recruiting, right? Kenny Brooks has always been a really good recruiter. Tech stock just went up. And I think, obviously, it's not going to be easy to replace Taylor Soule and Deasia Gregg and Kayana Traylor, but that's better than trying to replace Elizabeth Kitley and Cayla King as well. You only have to replace 3 players. And Tech's obviously going to develop some young players, but now you got 5. You've essentially got 5 scholarships to round out your lineup in the transfer portal with.
Right.
How do you do it? And if you do it the right way, we're sitting here talking about Virginia Tech come October. The Hokies are the favorite to win the ACC and to make another Final Four run. And that's just the way it is. And I think, from everything Kenny Brooks has done in the past would say that Kenny Brooks knows what he's doing on the recruiting trail and he's going to get the right talent in. So I don't think there's anything to fret about. I think the Hokies are in a really, really good position, a position they've never been in before, which is weird, but also very unique.
Playing with Liz Kitley, Georgia Amore, Cayla King, certainly quite the selling point in the portal. All right, let's flip to the men's side of things. They have addressed some needs in the portal. Mike Young has been quite the busy man, adding Mehki Long from Old Dominion and Tyler Nickel from North Carolina. What catches your eye about adding that pair?
Well, so we still don't know if Grant Basile and Hunter Couture are coming back.
True.
I would expect them to announce something sometime in the near future. But right now, Tech is sitting basically on the edge in terms of scholarships. I believe Tech's got 11 or 12 scholarship players right now with the addition of Nickel. I don't know. It's at the bottom of my Nickel article if you want to go take a look,
I'll pull it up.
But Tyler Nickel, we'll talk about him for a sec first. He's from Harrisonburg, played at East Rockingham High School in Elkton, Virginia, up off 81. His parents played college basketball. He's a VHSL's all-time leading scorer. Came down to Tech in North Carolina in the first place. He went to North Carolina. Now he's transferring to Virginia Tech. He's kind of long and lengthy. He's kind of like, in my mind, maybe a little bit more of an advanced, more of a highly touted recruited John Camden, if that makes sense. Yeah. Long and lanky. Probably more of a 3 or a 4. Probably a 3. But then Mehki Long, a little bit more built, and he's a way better rebounder. Now, keep in mind that Nichols, he was only a freshman this year.
Right.
Long has 1 year of eligibility left. Was at Rhode Island. Was at Old Dominion for a couple years. He was a pretty good double-double machine for a while there. He had a double-double against Tech earlier in the year. These are 2 solid additions. I'm curious to see how what other moves Mike Young makes. Because right now, the starting 5 is pretty solid, right? You've got Sean Padua. If Hunter Couture comes back, it's Hunter Couture. If not, it's Rodney Rice, MJ Collins, Tyler Nickel, Mehki Long, Grant Basile if he's in the conversation. I think the question is, if Grant Basile and Hunter Couture don't come back, that's some depth that you're missing. Now, the Hokies would obviously have room to go pick some other guys up in the portal. But I think Mekhi Long is a pretty solid addition, especially on the glass. He rebounds very, very well. He gets the free throw line. He's going to be a solid asset. He can handle the ball all right. He's pretty shifty. I think he's a good addition. I'm curious to see how Nickel fits in. I think Nickel will be good too, but I think he slides more into kind of like the backcourt and the wings spot. And Tech's got plenty of depth there. Obviously, Darius Maddox and Darren Buchanan enter the transfer portal, so there are 2 scholarships to make up there. But I think the Hokies are going to be okay. I think the big question comes down to developing the current players. But I think Long and Nickel are good additions. If Grant Basile and Hunter Couture come back, you're looking at a pretty solid rotation, right? You're looking at Rodney Rice, Sean Padula, Hunter Couture, probably Mekhi Long and Grant Basile, unless you pick up another guy to complement Basile in the front court. Tyler Nickel and MJ Collins coming off the bench. That's a pretty good rotation. Lynn Kidd, Moajo Poteet, that's all right. If they continue to develop, that'll be even better. If Grant Basile and Hunter Couture are staying, that's a good rotation. The question is whether or not they're going to stay, and we won't know that for probably a little while.
Grant Basile and Hunter Couture, if they both stick around, I pulled up your article. That's 11 scholarships used. They have 2 available. Obviously, that will ebb and flow depending on those 2.
Yeah.
Their
so
decisions.
if they both stay, then Tech has no scholarships.
Right.
But again, that's not like a bad position to be in, right? I think there were a lot of good pieces to this year's team. I think one of the big problems was team defense. I think Mekhi Long's a pretty solid defender. I think Nickel can be. So I think those defensive pieces are good. You figure that Mike Young will get the guys to play pretty good offense. That's just kind of what he's used to. But I think, honestly, developing some of the young guys is another big thing. Like if Tech can develop John Camden to the point where John Camden can be a comfortable option, I think that's good. I think MJ Collins and Rodney Rice learned a lot. But you always hear coaches talk about how between the freshman and sophomore year is where you make the most growth, right? You are used to being in college. You have 1 year in terms of getting your body to where it should be in college. Your second, in between your freshman and sophomore year, your first and second year, you basically know what you want. You know where you're supposed to be. I'm curious to see how many of those guys, Rodney Rice, MJ Collins, even John Camden, who, this is technically his 3rd season coming up, but he redshirted because of an injury. So I'm curious to see how it all shakes out, but I do think Long and Nickel are pretty solid additions for now.
I pulled up some numbers. Long averaged 10.7 points per game, 8.7 boards a season ago for the Monarchs. Also led the Sun Belt in double-doubles. Nickel 2.1 points per game in 6 minutes played a game for the Tar Heels this past season. He also scored 8 points in 25 minutes when Tech took down Carolina in Castle Coliseum back in December. Long scored 10 points and secured 11 rebounds in ODU's loss to Virginia Tech in Charleston back in November. And you mentioned that Nickel was between Virginia Tech and North Carolina out of high school in the Harrisonburg area. He finally lands up in Blacksburg. Last question for you. Is Mike Young done?
What? Done? Meaning?
In the portal.
Oh.
Sorry.
You should have specified.
Is he done in the portal?
I think it all depends on whether Basile and Couture come back. Because if they come back, then maybe. I would lean towards yes. If Basile and Couture don't come back, then no. He's got to get more. He's got to get some more guys. But again, I think it's kind of the same situation for Mike Young and Kenny Brooks. They both succeeded in the portal for the most part. Kenny more than Mike, but Kenny also has a Final Four appearance to show for it, right? I think Grant Basile and Kevin Aluma and Storm Murphy were all really good players for Mike Young. I think one of the problems is it's so inconsistent, and Kenny Brooks has found a way to keep his core group together for so long. If you can keep Hunter Couture and Sean Padula and Grant Basile together for another year, that's really good. Add a healthy Rodney Rice to the mix. I think that's really good. If Couture and Basile leave, then you're looking at the same thing again you did last year, which is everybody has to figure out how to play together again. And maybe Lynn Kidd starts at the 5. I don't know. It's a little bit complicated. So that situation's more complicated than, you know, it really just comes down to Couture and Basile. But, you know, it's more clear cut on the women's side, right? You've got 5 scholarships to pick up as many players as you want. You know, that fill those scholarships, basically address your needs. You know, with the men's team, it's a little bit different because it hinges on whether Basile and Couture come back. And I think they probably should. I think they could probably make both good NIL money. But whether or not they're done with college basketball, we'll see.
David Cunningham, our managing editor, thanks for hopping on.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yep, appreciate it as always. All right, that'll do it for our first segment of TSL today. When we come back, Chris Hirons hops on to talk Virginia Tech baseball's series win over Virginia. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.